let's start the show.
People, are you ready? Let's start the show. Let's start the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the I Like Birds podcast. Today is Thursday, January 12th. You may be listening now or you may be listening in the future, and we're just grateful you're here. I'm so pumped about today. This is the first episode of the year 2023, and I got my brother-in-law with me, Zach Vincent. Say hello to the people.
How's it going, y'all? And good afternoon to you, brother.
Yeah, man. Great to see you. You've just been gone out of town for like the last 5 days back home in Maryland. So it's just good to see you. And we haven't talked in a while. So I feel like that's by design so that we could just really, get into this convo like we normally do. You guys should hear our conversations at the family's house, at birthday parties, and just outside on the porch, just talking life and liberty and freedom and what this country's doing. We got a lot to discuss on this one today, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Me too.
So Zach, tell the people a little bit about you, man, and what you've done in life, where you are now, what you're excited about in the future.
Well, I was born in Haiti, and I lived there for about 5 years. So my family immigrated legally after that, which I have to know.
You gotta say legally.
We legally came over, which it's a process, but it's not that hard to do.
Yeah.
And I lived in Florida for the first half of my life, and then we moved to Maryland afterwards because there's a large Haitian community there too. And then when I was 17, well, let me back up a little bit. I was also a wrestling champion. I played football a little bit.
Let's go.
When I was 17, I joined the Marine Corps, and I served for 4 years. I ended up getting out as a corporal, and I had a couple deployments overseas. One to Australia and one to the Middle East and Syria, which was very eye-opening for me. And ever since, I've just been trying to be a good man, trying to find my way out into this world and navigate and try to be a light for other men, honestly, to be more manly. Because, I mean, we're going to get into it, but, I think we have an epidemic of manliness that's going on in this modern day, and that we need to be there for each other and teach each other how to be a man in this modern day.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you take that away from your experiences in the military, or was that something that's always been kind of on your heart, or is this something just newly unraveled because of COVID and all that we've seen as far as the media and just the corruption, deception? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think partly both. Like, as I was growing up, I didn't have the best father figure, and I know for a lot of young black men, and for any race really, but it's specifically young black men where the fathers are more likely to be absent than not.
Yeah.
They can take that experience and take it into a negative way. And I chose to do it in a positive way. Like, okay, my father wasn't here to show me how to be manly, so I'm going to search out these things for myself and try to be a good man despite that fact, not because of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I love that. And I feel we've had a conversation or two just as recently about your journey to Christ and, coming back to the faith even more so is in your own way, in your own perspective, by having other men around you that have been godly and living that life in the faith. What would you say is like that pulling and that draw that makes you want to lean in closer to him because of that experience with other men?
Well, I'd say chiefly the Holy Spirit. I feel like I've been called to serve Christ in a better way. And all throughout my life, I grew up Christian. I went to church and everything like that. And I've always been knowledgeable of the Bible and everything like that. But I think it's truly just maybe even like 6 months ago that I started actually trying to live what the Bible's preaching and to be a good man in that way. Because, I mean, to bring it back to what I was talking about with my father, when I first joined the Marine Corps, I kind of adopted that Marine mantra just because I was like, oh, well, this is what a man is. I'm supposed to drink all this beer and fight and do all this stuff. And in a way, that's toxic masculinity. I hate using that word, but it is. And it's from actually getting married to Abigail and joining this family and seeing you and Tyler and Gary, the way you guys treat your families and the way you guys serve your families through God and have your family serve God really opened my eyes to like, wow, so it doesn't have to be toxic masculinity. There's
Right.
good masculinity too.
Yeah, I love that you say that, man, because I'm married into the family as well, and I've gotten to see what Sarge is named Gary Sargent is like a leader of our family. You get to see his grace, you get to see the way he forgives and the way he's just easygoing with certain situations, the way he's helpful, the way he's just there for his entire family, and just carries us. It seems like, and just inserts where he's supposed to be, and where just the way the family's on a path, I feel like is led by him very well, and it's like inspiring.
He's a patriarch, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
And you hear the modern society is always down with the patriarchy, down with the patriarchy. Well, these roles are here for a reason, and I'm not against feminism per se, but I am against trying to bend gender roles into changing them to whatever you want, because God made man and woman, and those roles are, no woman could ever be a man, no man could ever be a woman, in my opinion, and I'm sorry, I just got lost a little bit.
No, you said that, and it actually made me think of something that was very profound that I heard, that for the gender roles, because sometimes I'll be with my wife Catherine, and I'll be talking to her and be like, yo, like, laundry though, she's like, why do you prescribe like gender roles, just kind of playing around. But at the same time, it's interesting that they did a study that when people, for instance, get into like a survival mode, like for instance, just being like lost on an island or being lost at sea, or being, stuff like that, where the gender roles all of a sudden kick back into like their natural state. The men will go out and hunt and like start the fires, and the women will take care of the kids and making sure that people are being healed and cared for. It's interesting how that works when
there's a reason why it's like that. There's a reason why it's like that. And I think on the macro level, like laundry and stuff like that, I don't mind cleaning the house. I don't mind doing laundry for my wife. It's the macro, the leading, taking charge. Yeah. And like you were saying about Sarge, pointing out the direction that the family needs to go and taking them in that direction, providing for the family, making sure that everything's set up so that y'all can survive and thrive, which women can do too, but also in a different way. Like Abigail, we're really trying, my wife, we're definitely trying to make her a stay-at-home wife if we can. I mean, this economy is a little bit
challenging to do so.
It's hard to do that. And I mean, there's reasons for that too. I'm not saying that it's a government conspiracy or anything like that, but it's when women left the house, and it's kind of become like this taboo thing to be a stay-at-home mom now,
right? Or scoffed at.
Exactly. But they're needed there to teach the children, because now it gets into the point of like, we're pawning off all these things to the government. We're pawning off the education of our children. We're pawning off our protection. We're pawning off the way we get food and the way that we feed ourselves and provide for our family. Yeah. So now it becomes the government is in control of everything. And if you know anything about government departments or anything like that, I just got delayed 4 hours because the FAA computers went down. It's not efficient. They just kind of throw money at things until and hope that it's going to fix it, not necessarily put policy behind it that's going to fix it.
Not only money, debt. They print it. They throw it at it, and then that just puts us in a further bind. And I love what you said about, not getting down that rabbit hole of trying to keep the moms in the workforce, but it really divides the family. And you talked earlier about fathers not being in the families because the family unit has been really just divided. They got moms in the workforce and taxing the mom's workforce and not at home with the kids. So then therefore the kids are in the hands of the government, and then therefore you can be more controlled. And like you said, we're being dependent on everything to be, handed to us and fed to us. And they did that even more so with COVID. And I don't want to be, in a state of dependency. And I don't think you do either.
No, absolutely not.
That centralized way of living isn't for us, because we see that the people that have that power don't always have our best
exactly
best state of mind.
I'd say it's an integral part of being a man is to be independent, and not that you need to do everything by yourself, but like you need to at least have the know-how of how to get along and survive if like things like all the things that we take for granted here are taken away at some point. And we can get into my experience in Syria a little bit, and even being from Haiti, for the audience that if you're not caught up on what's going on in Haiti right now, the government has completely partially collapsed. Let's say it's a failed state. Gangs are running the street. they're holding hostage people, and they're holding hostage resources that could be used to better the country. And in Syria, it was pretty much the same thing. Assad's government was in control of the western part of the country, but on the eastern part of the country, closest to the border of Iraq, is just ISIS and the SDF, which the Kurdish, I can't give praise to the SDF because really it was the PKK, and they're like a terrorist organization. But
Jeez.
when you take all that agencies taken away from you, and all those state processes are taken away from you, all the state and government benefits are taken away from you, you really see what struggle is. And that's what really opened my eyes on deployment in Syria is when no one's looking out for you and you got to look for out for yourself, you have to be able to do that, or else you're just going to be part of fodder is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and your experiences over there, and of course, growing up in Haiti and just overseas and stuff like that. So I feel like you have that outside perspective of what could happen in America if things weren't, set up the way they are based on our Christian, values that we have in place, our founding fathers, our Constitution, and even the Second Amendment. You've spoken very highly to me in private conversations about how the Second Amendment may be the only thing preventing the government from actually doing what they're doing elsewhere. On a global scale, as far as, taking away freedom of speech. I mean, we're seeing censorship online like never before. We're seeing Andrew Tate, who speaks out against the narrative, get arrested in Romania, and he's a big advocate for masculinity and, getting away from the government, making sure you're independent and stuff like that. So what do you think happens and if they try to continue to take the Second Amendment away? Well,
another point on that is, did you hear recently that Jordan Peterson is getting his license taken away in Canada?
Really?
Yeah, he is, because of he wouldn't agree to go to a re-education camp or something like that, which is ridiculous. Because Jordan Peterson, honestly, he's helped me with my evolution from a young
boy to a man.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of the stuff that he has to say is very solid. But the fact that they're censoring people like that is ridiculous. And where the Second Amendment comes into that is we don't even have to ever use it, but just the fact that the AR-15, for example, is the most common rifle in America. Just the fact that you have one in your house is a backstop, and the founding fathers put that in the Second Amendment for a reason.
Right.
A well-regulated militia shall not be infringed, or something. I don't know the direct.
Sounds like Miranda rights.
Yeah. But they put that in there because they know that once the federal government gets too much power, then there's nothing that the individual citizen can do to check that, or even a group of citizens. So even having your AR-15 stops them from just coming into your house whenever, or because of that. I don't want to say threat, but it is kind of a threat of it's a checks and balances between the government and the citizen. Yeah. And it's our only checks and balances between the government and the citizen. Otherwise, we wouldn't be living in a democracy. We'd be living in a dictatorship, you know?
Do you think that's what they want? Do you think that there's a goal going on a wide macro scale to essentially, I don't want to say completely, depopulate the country, but essentially, take control of the people in a way that we haven't experienced yet in our lifespan? I mean, I'm 29, you're what, 25? So
I do think so. And I think that it's kind of evident in what they're trying to make men into these days. They're not, so I talked about toxic masculinity, and I do believe that there is toxic masculinity. You've seen the guy that's always puffing his chest, trying to be the biggest dude in the room, trying to fight everyone. And then there's godly masculinity too, and which I'd say the perfect example is Sarge.
Right.
No offense to Sarge, I wouldn't be scared to fist fight him or anything like that. But there's that, and I'm gonna use the word fear, but not a fear in oh, I'm scared of you, but a good fear of I don't want to let you down, or I want to be reliable to you and stuff like that. That he kind of pulls out of you just through his godly masculinity, I'll call it.
Yeah, and I like that.
when you take a look at what the government is pushing in schools right now with this gender ideology stuff and the CRT and everything like that, it kind of seems like they're trying their hardest to make men docile and easy to control. And the easiest way to do that is to get them to chop off their body parts and be depressed and tell them that they have no control over their circumstance in life. Or if you're like a young black kid, they're this is a system that's racist. You can't get past it, you know. So there's no reason to bother trying or anything like that. And it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And that's I'm really glad that I was naturalized into the United States as a citizen instead of being born here. Yeah. Which I love the United States. And the reason why I say that is because I was able to unashamedly be proud of being American, because I'm from Haiti, dude. America's so much better than Haiti. America saved my life. So I can be proud to be American. And just to tell you a little story, I think I told you this before, but for the audience. Yeah. When I was 9 years old, I think, when was I 9? In 2006. So that's when the insurgency in Iraq was picking up. And I begged my mom, like, please stop at this Marine Corps office so I can go in and talk to them. And I'm like 9 years old. That boy's a real one at 9. That boy like Noah. And yeah, Noah's a real one too. But I went in there and I told the recruiters, the day I am able to enlist and come fight for this country, I promise you I will. I promise you I will. And they gave me a little standing ovation or a clap. Really? Dang. Yeah, because I felt so strongly even then about seeing like what America had done for me, and I just want to give back to it, which is another segue that we can get into. But like I said before, I ended up doing it 17. So even before I was able to, I lied to my mom and told her I was going intelligence so that she'd sign the paper to let me go early. And you went infantry? I went infantry, yeah. I was a 0352, which was a anti-tank missile man. But dang.
So with your experience in the military, did it kind of shape the way that you perceive the world differently?
Well, yeah, 100%. Before I went to Syria specifically, I was under the same impression as a lot of people of like, oh, like this is the United States, like nothing could ever happen here, like we don't have to worry about it because we're the US. But then after Syria, and especially after 2020 happened, I really thought that a whole lot, just because, I mean, I'm a amateur historian. I've always loved like war history, and I think history is told by the wars that happened throughout it, and most of the major events that have happened in our history is just this war, and then this war happened, and then this war happened, and it sparked this technological advance. But there's no reason why any of that stuff can't happen here in the US, and it's only the citizen and our founding fathers that put those checks and balances there that have stopped it from happening already. Yeah. But all major empires go through some type of lull and peak in their power. I mean, the Roman Empire it went through that kind of thing almost every 80. Well, I don't want to quote wrong, but they went through it very often. There were lots of civil wars and stuff like that, and social unrest in the Roman Empire. And us being ignorant to that fact, us being blind to that and thinking it could never happen, is what exactly is going to lead to that sort of thing, because we won't uphold like you see the government right now, the one that's in power right now is coming after First Amendment rights, they're coming after Second Amendment rights. And after that Second Amendment right is gone, they're gonna come after Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, so where they can just come into your house whenever they want and do whatever. Yeah. But those things are there for a reason. And the fact that we've stopped paying attention to it, and I mean, that's a lot. Social media has done a lot to where we don't really care anymore. The citizen's not as concerned as what's going on in the government right now. And a lot of people are just voting based on emotion instead of looking at what this country was supposed to be and how we're supposed to run it. Right. You know what I'm saying?
That's a big one with emotion, because they really tap into that in such a methodical way. And even so, we're talking about, CRT, that stuff was really engineered to tap into the emotion and make people feel like they're oppressed, and this is the way you should perceive your reality.
It's so ridiculous because my question to all those people that are following the CRT ideology, it's like, what race do you think most of the Union soldiers were that were fighting to free the slaves? You know, they were white. A large majority of them were white.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some black regiments and everything like that, but so, and you have to look at the context of when it was happening too.
Yeah.
You know, 1860s, a lot of countries still had slavery well afterwards, and they like to say the U.S., the U.S., the U.S. Right. Every Western country in that time was still dealing in slavery and doing all this and that, and we had a war. It wasn't just people arguing in legislation or anything like that. People were willing to put down their lives to free the slaves. And even as far back as the American Revolution, it was a hotly debated topic on whether like slaves were going to be freed or not.
And I can't even see the culture that we're living in and the people that live in the society being willing to go to war for anything on behalf of somebody else.
No, I don't. We live in a very selfish society.
You know, and that blows my mind that it was not that long ago where we were fighting for something that was, you know, like that, you know, and it's powerful. And when you and I talk sometimes about like the future as far as how divided we are as a nation, you know, Democrat, Republican, truth, lie, you know, it's so much one side of the aisle that, you know, we talked before about the potential of a civil war breaking out. And I've expressed to you, man, I just cannot see people taking to the streets or taking to up in arms against one another. When in reality, it's like the ones that are really, you know, responsible for all this divisiveness and the social engineering and programming people it's, you know, the government, the media, the corporations, the institutions that are all having those seats of power to just put that thing in front of your face to make you believe a certain way.
Well, and I think that's exactly why that shows you that is possible, is because even though I don't believe these thoughts are originally these people's, they do believe them now, and they believe very strongly about them. And to get to your point about everyone, I don't think everyone's going to engage in this civil war if it ends up happening. It's going to be the people that feel the most strongly about it.
That's true.
And that even if there's 20,000 people on each side fighting it out,
that's still a war.
That's still a war,
yeah,
and that's still gonna affect a lot of things that are going on into this country. So it doesn't. It doesn't. It might not be every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there, you know. But
I think that's the way we perceive it when we're not like a historian, as far as, you know, because I perceive like the Civil War as being like a lot of the people, like majority of the people were out there like, let's get it.
No, it was. Maybe for the South, there were a lot of people that conscripted and they really believed, and not all of them were fighting for slavery. I do have to say that, and I used to think that, but a lot of it, I see the states' rights issue now, just because we're kind of going through a states' rights issue right now, in my opinion. The federal government, it's an entity that wants to eat and eat and eat up more power, and you can see it with. After 9/11, the Patriot Act, you know, they took a lot of, they saw how much power they can get away with taking, so they took that. And then COVID as well.
They said, take your shoes off.
Yeah, exactly.
We gonna make you take your shoes off.
COVID as well. They gained a lot of power. I know. I was in Maryland when COVID happened, and there were a lot of people that didn't come out of their house for like
months,
years, like a year and a half, 2 years. They didn't come out.
There's still people out here wearing masks like religiously.
Oh, in Maryland, it's like, it's not everyone, but it's still like half the people I saw were wearing masks over there. And
that's wild. Like, even though like there's been countless amount of studies and doctors coming out saying the masks don't work, even Fauci himself saying it doesn't work yet, they're still part of it. You think it's, I don't want to say a cult, but do you think it's kind of like has that kind of vibe to it?
So I don't know. This is getting. I'm gonna put my tinfoil hat on real quick. But there are with the I think Twitter Files 12. There were messages from the U.S. Army talking about doing psyops in the United States and the FBI, what we know about them and what the CIA is probably doing now. I really think that it is, I use the word brainwashing, but not in a mystical sense of like, oh, they shoot out this beam and you believe this stuff. But when someone is doctoring what you can see, what point of views you can see, and they're doctoring how that news is presented to you,
Scary.
then you are going to believe what they're telling you if they
It's what you take.
present
It's
it.
what you're taking
exactly.
in. Yeah.
It's the information that you're taking in, which is why I feel some of these people are not seeing the truth necessarily. But at the same time, I have to wonder to myself, like, I was living in Maryland, and I would watch a news thing and that doesn't seem to be true. Like, let me do some research on that.
Yeah.
Some people never get past that step. They just see it like, all right.
Right. And
It's
get on
CNN,
Right.
trust. They were trusted beforehand,
Yeah.
before all this, the culture war started.
Yeah.
Let me trust them now. They wouldn't lie to me, but like they're just blatantly lying to people, which is why I think that it seems so cult-like,
Right. And let's go back to the masculine men thing. So how can somebody essentially not be a weak man and not conform to what what they're trying to push onto the young man in this country, especially like the youth? Like, let's say somebody in high school right now is listening to this. Like, what advice would you give them to be able to step into that role of masculinity and be able to walk in the calling that God has in store for their life?
I'd say responsibility. You have a duty. You have a duty as a man, and I really think that's the way God made it. You have a duty to God, to be a godly man. You have a duty to your country, to be a good and concerned citizen. And you have a duty to your family, to be a good father, a good brother, a good son. And for someone in high school, I'd tell them they're probably someone's son, someone's brother. Try to be the best brother you can be. Try to be the best son you can be. Take responsibility. Make that your duty to be the best son you can be, or the best father you can be if you have kids. And take that responsibility of agency over yourself. Quit relying on all these different things to make you feel better about your life. Get to work, Get to work. Find something that you love. Work hard to make it your own. And then once you do that, give back. That's the main. Well, like while I was talking about the Marine Corps story when I was 9, that's the main driving factor for me of doing all that stuff and being a good son and being a good father. I want to give back to the people that love me. And a lot of people have the mindset of just take.
Yeah.
Oh, the government needs to pay my student loans. They need to give me this welfare. And I'm not against welfare, but if you have the ability to work and do it on your own, there's no reason why you should be trying to take from other people to feed your lot,
Right. And you're leaning on your infirmity and you're making that part of your identity.
Exactly.
You're putting yourself, welfare is designed to keep you poor. It's not designed to help you. It keeps you on that number for the rest of your life to where you feel like you can't rise up and reach new goals.
It's just an evolved version of that victim mentality.
Yes.
And that's with the CRT thing. It's victim mentality. You're a victim. You have no agency. You can't do it yourself. You can't change the way things are yourself.
Which is such a poor way to live. It's a poor mindset, because if we thought the opposite, and we thought, I think the opposite. If we leaned into truth, then we can just rise up to so much more. We would have so much more self-belief within ourselves. We would be able to help other people. We'd be able to grow and just reach new levels and try different things. But if we're always viewing ourselves as like, they owe me something, or I can't achieve this because of this, it's like, that's where we fall into this bind of just, we're bound by the labels that somebody else puts on us. We're bound by what the government pays us. It's a slippery slope. And you mentioned fatherhood as being a big one, as like your focus, and you're actually expecting a little baby with Abigail.
Expecting my first child.
Super exciting stuff. And like, what do you want for like your child to view you as far as the man side of you goes?
Well, I want to be my child's hero. I want them to look up at me and say like, that is someone I want to emulate. And that's been a really, and even now I'm still refining myself and everything like that, but that's been a big goal of mine. Well, that will continue to be a big goal of mine, for my child to see me and say, I want to be like him, you know? And that's like, they say imitation is the highest form of flattery. Yeah, exactly. So for your son to imitate you, or your daughter to want to imitate you, or her mother, you know, that is, it'd be the best thing in the world to me. And that way, through my actions of working hard, being a good man, and we can talk about more what I feel like is a good man. Everyone has their own different definitions, but a good solid member of the community, someone who takes up and is, other people come to them for when they're in need and help, you know, and that the basic idea of a patriarch, like back to Gary, like that is how I would want to be viewed by my children. You know, I don't want them to just see me as, I don't know,
a bum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not even just a bum, because like they might not see you as a bum, but like,
I know. I went super. I just thought of the funniest word possible.
So not necessarily a bum, because there's a lot of fathers that are out there that are working and doing everything like that. But yeah, they're mediocre. They come home. All they want to do is, you know, they crack open a beer. They're not in their child's life. And there's nothing to be wowed about, you know? Like, oh, my dad's a mechanic. But when he comes home, he just cracks open a beer and turned on the television. Which
well, I will say, naturally though, my father talked about this. He said, enjoy like the first, 5 to 7 years of their life, or 5 to 7 years of their life, essentially, because you are automatically their superhero. But after that, 8, 9, 10, when they start to develop that, that, I'm not saying that frontal cortex at that point, but they start to develop something where they're more conscious and aware of things, and like what you do that's wrong, you can really lose that.
Well, I think the way you keep that is with character, because like there's like I brought up mechanic. Mechanic's an awesome profession. There's nothing wrong with being a mechanic. Like they make good money.
I could use one.
Yeah. It's your character within that. Like, so yeah, you could be, I would say, just a mechanic, which is not something that, like, I don't know many kids whose heroes are a mechanic, but through your character, like your kids can remember, oh, my dad always gave someone a fair deal, my dad always treated people with respect when he came into the shop. My dad always tried to help people when they were struggling and they came into the shop and stuff like that. Those are the things that child's going to remember when they start growing up and getting older, so it's not necessarily what you're doing that's going to make you their hero. It's going to be who you are and how you treat people in this life.
Do you think we get that character from Christ?
I do. I really do. I've met good people that aren't Christian necessarily, but I think that in Christ is where you get the complete picture of like a good man. Because I think a good man should be fervorous as well. Should be fervorous about their passion for the Lord and want to teach their family that, teach their kids that, so that they can go on and spread the message as well, which is, I'm trying to become more knowledgeable in the Bible so I can teach it in a responsible way, you know? Because my whole life in the Haitian church especially, it's always like, you'll know the word better than I do, but it's this kind of preaching that's like, oh, if you come to God, he's going to do prosperity. This for you. Prosperity preaching. Yep. He's going to do this for you. He's going to do that for you. He's going to make you rich. And it kind of ties back into the giving type of thing. What can you do for the Lord? You know, if you're going out and trying to be fashioned into a tool of the Lord and to be used by Him for His glory, not your own, your kids will see that too, and they'll want to become Christian more through your example, through your. It ties into what we were talking about with your character and everything like that. They'll see how good of a Christian man you are, and they'll want to be that same thing, because they look up to you.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. And I'll be honest with you, man, it sucks when you're seeing, you said that your children kind of take after you, and imitation is the greatest flattery. It's always a bummer. And I'm working on this. You know, my character is still being developed. My fatherhood skills are being developed. Me as a man is still being developed. But it's a real bummer when you see like your kid do something that you do that you don't like them doing. And then you have, you know, your wife graciously with a kind heart saying, where does he get it from?
Yeah.
He sees you treat him like that. And then that's why, you know, so it's just one of those things where you have to be really mindful about that. And seeing that, you know, in my own household and seeing like, oh, the way I treat him is like the way he might treat his brother. That's something that is like, it hits you to the point where you're like, man, I got to make a change. I got to watch my speech. I got to watch the way my tone is and the way my attitude is towards my children and keep that good character in line.
It's always, you said something like you're in the process of doing all that, the progress of doing all that. It doesn't stop.
Never stops.
It doesn't stop. You are constantly progressing into who you need to become till the day you die. There's never a day where you're just like, oh, like this is it. I can stop working on myself.
Yeah. If you're not dead, God's not done.
Exactly. I saw that from the last episode, and I thought that was a really
It is, bro. It makes you think about things of like an ever-changing, you know, growth process, and like sanctification is a process. It talks about that in the Bible, and transformation. You know, we're on a path to righteousness through Christ, and that's why it's so important to, you know, stay connected to Him and trying not to backslide, and always making sure that you're putting, you know, God's morality above your own morality, and you know, the character of God over your own fleshly character, because your fleshly character is kind of flawed. It's pretty trash. It's pretty selfish. It's pretty ego-driven.
We see the ideology that the government's running with these days of, their ideology of vices, I'd call it, because I've never seen so many gambling ads put up in my life. They're everywhere, gambling. And then you have the sexual aspect of it, where they're telling these young women to go out and like show themselves on the internet for money, which is morally just, it's wrong, but they're telling you it's not.
It's more and more perverse, and it gets us not only adapting to that sometimes, even as Christians, we start to just blend in with the world, but also we become comfortable with it. I was just listening to Tony Evans today on the way to the coffee shop that I was at prior to coming here, and he was talking about that. So like, we need to be different. We have the Holy Spirit within us, and the Holy Spirit cries out when we become like the world.
Exactly.
Holy Spirit wants to depart from us. That dove that's inside of us wants to evade, because it's so like the world that it just wants to depart from us. You know, so we got to make sure that we're not bending to the culture when we're still leaning into Christ.
No, we have to stand fast. I mean, what would have happened if the Christians that are getting persecuted by the Roman Empire, they started bending to the Roman will? And the state of the Roman Empire was not good at the time. There was debauchery in the streets and all these different things. They actually took Aurelian to come in. I forget the exact year. I want to say it's a little bit after Christ, maybe 50 AD, 100 AD, that time frame, to where they call him, to get into history a little bit, Aurelian, the previous emperor was on his deathbed, and Aurelian was just one of his generals, and he called Aurelian into the room, and he said, Aurelian, you have to save the empire. It's crumbling. The currency was devalued. There's debauchery in the streets, to where the family unit of the Roman Empire was broken. They were getting invaded on all borders, and I know some of this sounds a little familiar, right?
Yeah, right.
They're getting invaded in all directions from their borders. And he put on this mask, and he said, I'm not going to take this mask off until I restore the empire. And the Romans actually named him Restitutor Orbis, which in Latin is restorer of the world, because he took the empire from the brink of collapse to giving it another 300 and maybe more. If you ask a true historian, depending on who you ask, they'd say the Byzantine Empire is a continuation of the Roman Empire. The Byzantines viewed themselves as Roman. They spoke Latin, engaged in all the Roman customs. And even before the fall of Rome, the city, they had already moved their capital to Constantinople anyway, because it was a more central position in the empire. So,
geez, that boy in his bag on history.
Yeah.
I like that.
History has always been my thing.
Good, bro. We need that, because if, you know, what do you learn from history? You know, what would you say is your reason for, studying it?
Well, if you see how things were in the past, then you can kind of know where you're going in the future. Not exactly. It's shaded in a different color. But these things, they say history repeats itself.
rhymes.
Not really. Not really. It rhymes, yeah, in a sense, or it's painted with a different color.
Yeah.
You can learn lessons of the past, and I mean, I think that's a human thing to do. Ever since we were hunter gatherers and stuff like that, we've been passing on oral traditions. That's where stories come from. Actually, is just trying to pass on in an entertaining way, because it's got to be entertaining for you to remember.
I mean, Christ, all his parables were stories.
Exactly.
And the way he taught was in stories.
Exactly.
Has weight.
And those stories and the nucleus of those stories gets passed down from generation to generation, and it teaches lessons. So that's why I love reading novels, because a lot of people say, oh, you have to read nonfiction to get a lesson from it, But you can get a lesson from a novel if it's a good written novel. There's going to be a main idea of that story that ties into, I think, I'm going to misquote this terribly, but there's like 6 core nucleus stories that have been passed down ever since human civilization have started to build up. I forget what they are, but
Google it.
Yeah, we can Google it.
No, I'm saying the listener Google it. But I wanted to ask you this, man, because we've had great convos so far, but I want to know, like, what gets Zach Vincent fired up about what's happening in this country right now?
The debauchery, I say. Abortion is one of the big ones. I believe abortion shouldn't be a thing, but I'm also of the mentality that I don't want to push my certain beliefs on people. I do believe abortion's murder, but I'm willing to compromise on that in the sense of, like, Texas makes abortion illegal and Maryland has it legal. Okay, move to Maryland. We're a constitutional republic. That's fine by me on a law sense, but on a moral sense, I think it's morally reprehensible to do that. And a lot of the arguments I've been hearing are like post-term abortions or like full-term.
It's always like the 1 of 1% that the argument is built on.
Yeah, and it's like ridiculous. That's a human life. I don't care. Like, even if you like argue that's not a human life at conception, which I think it is, that is a human life.
Once it's going to be, yeah.
Well, no, they're talking about post-term. So it's like the baby's born, and then the parents make a decision on whether they want it to be alive or not.
That's inhumane.
Yes, exactly.
To the highest degree.
Exactly. And then the violence that's going on in our streets. We talked about the Second Amendment. I highly recommend that everyone, like every lawful abiding citizen, has a weapon to protect themselves. Because especially in big cities right now, you can look up a whole bunch of videos of just random acts of violence. I saw a video of this dude, it was a homeless lady in Portland. She pushed a 3-year-old onto the tracks.
I saw that too.
Just for no reason. And when you see that, you see our society's sick. This is not how a good society runs, and it can't run like this forever. So the moral destruction of the society is kind of a precursor to its destruction as a whole. And the fact that we're not pushing, like school shootings, for example, they didn't used to be a thing. It's not the weapon that's causing this. Guns have been around for a long time, and people haven't.
So have schools.
Exactly. It's the state of our mentality is what's causing all these things. What else? The encroachment of government powers. I think their states should have more powers right now, and it would make our vote count more, because there's so many of us that the federal government can get away with the tactics that they're using right now, just to garner in as many votes as they want and then have no accountability. What else boils my blood? Like, mainly the debauchery thing. It seems like you can't rely on other people to be good people anymore necessarily, and I feel like that wasn't the way in the past.
Do you think that's just what's broadcasted, though? Do you think that that's just what's like colluding the airways, essentially? That because it seems that there's such a disconnect between the internet and real life. I said this one time about a year and some change ago. I said that the enemy is winning online, the devil's winning the internet, and Christians are winning in real life. Meaning, when I said that, I meant more so that society is still functioning, and granted, I'm in Texas, so that's way different than if I were in Maryland, which some of your experiences are, and I'm from Florida, so those are the two places I frequent, which are more more freedom loving states.
Yes.
But I see society still, obviously it's not as connected and friendly as it once was, but there is still a sense of like safety. There is still a sense of civilization and calmness and
where we're at. It's a good point that you brought that up. But like, for example, a few years ago, I went to a Trump rally in Sacramento, and there maybe were about 80, well, on the Trump side, there are about 80 to 150 people there, I'd say, just from guessing.
Wait, there's what? How many people?
Like 100 to 150, I'll say.
At a
Like,
Trump rally? That's it?
Yeah, it's in Sacramento.
150? That's it?
Yeah, it's in Sacramento. Trump wasn't there. It was just a rally, like...
Oh, he wasn't there?
No. It was just a conservative rally. Let's
Okay,
call it
I got you. All right,
but
there you go.
in support of Trump.
There you go.
And then there are 300 Antifa that came out. They're throwing M80s and like really heavy glass bottles and stuff like that. And there's actually a preacher there that was just preaching. He wasn't even politically motivated. He was just preaching. They beat this man to within an inch of his death.
Really?
Like, they beat this man bad just for being out there, and he was walking back to his car. Now, for the Sacramento police sake, they were there to stop it from escalating, but they weren't there to protect anyone, which that's when I saw, like, wow, the police really aren't for you. They're like, in some senses, like, I like sheriff's office and stuff like that. We need a sense of like control, maybe not control, but law and order.
Yeah.
Yes. But in a lot of, especially in these big cities, the police departments are just doing the biddings of their political overlords. So it showed me that it's not as online as you'd think. And like, another example I could use is swatting. People post someone's address online and have the SWAT team come through and like report like, oh, there's a person with a weapon here and they're going crazy, and the police have to react in kind to that. So they send the SWAT team to try to go de-escalate that situation, but in reality it's just a family eating dinner or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a slow roll, but it does come out.
Right.
It does.
One day it shows up on your doorstep is what
Exactly.
you're saying. Yeah.
And these things don't happen like, if you're not paying attention to it,
Right.
It will just, one day the veil of reality will just come down, and you'll see everything for as it is, and all the violence that people are capable of. So I'm reading a book about the Spanish Civil War right now in the 1930s, the precursor to World War II, a lot of people say, and the violence that those communists committed. They went through village by village, and any landowner, priest, whatever, they just shot them dead in the street and mutilated their bodies and stuff like that. And these are from firsthand accounts. Yeah. So, and did you think those people saw that coming? If they saw it coming, they wouldn't have been there when all that stuff happened. So and I don't want to be so
gung-ho about it.
Well, not gung-ho, but so doom and gloom about it, because we aren't at that point to where that's going to happen. But if we don't start paying attention to what's going on, pay attention to what they're teaching our kids, pay attention to how the government's moving, that will come about. And that is our duty. We were talking about the duty to God, duty to country as a citizen.
Yeah.
Well, that's where that part comes in. Your duty as a citizen is to pay attention to what's going on so that we can protect this wonderful democracy, constitutional republic that we have. Otherwise, the veil's going to be pulled. You know?
Right. So do you think that because there have been more people paying attention, we saw the moms going to the school boards and like, making their voices heard, and we see, even January 6th, I feel like even though they painted a picture one way, I think it had real life implications that maybe, prevented some other, things that don't have the country's best interest in mind from happening. Do you think that that's something that we can continue kind of seeing in in the landscape of the political landscape happening that's going to prevent, you know, the dark forces, I guess, from taking over and completely, almost like.
That's a loaded question for me.
Love it.
I'll answer it the best way I can.
Yeah.
Because I mean, in private, you know what we talked about, but yes, or it can exacerbate it. It just depends on what the elite want to do.
Right.
So I was really happy about January 6th because it showed that the American people still had some teeth. You know, that we aren't going to let the government just do whatever they want. And we do still have a say in things. And especially with what happened in Congress recently with the House of Representatives and the Freedom Caucus holding out on voting for Kevin McCarthy until certain concessions were made. All those concessions are things the American people wanted. We just want accountability.
What are some of those things for those listening that haven't been following the story?
So, number one, they're going to look into Biden's Ukraine dealings. They aren't going to pass any more funding to Ukraine for aid without a dedicated look at the bill. And they, I think one of the ones was they have to introduce each bill like one at a time. No more of these 1,400 page bills that you can't read through.
And that they just sign before Christmas.
Exactly.
So they can go on vacation.
And I'm blanking on the other ones right now.
Yeah, but they're all more in line with what the American people actually want. Wow.
Exactly.
The Freedom Caucus, is that what is kind of the terminology used to describe the people that are for more so like the Make America Great movement?
Yes.
Instead
exactly.
of, okay.
Yes.
And let me ask you about that. You know, we have about 8 minutes to wrap up here, but what do you think happens in 2024 as far as who runs and what's the base looking like? What is a Christian to maybe, you know, go into the voting booth thinking, and what is the path forward for the country in 2024?
I think that's pretty simple. I'd advise people to, first of all, don't end up falling into any type of trope, you know? So the same thing that happened with the Democrats where they'll just blindly vote for whatever candidate. I don't want to see the right get to that. So I'm really looking forward to the Trump DeSantis debates, and I'm gonna watch them unfanatically, like, you know, and see like who seems like they're gonna do a better job for America. I'm all for Trump, but I'm also all for DeSantis now, and I think our cup is kind of full that we have these two great options. Candidates that are gonna come up and debate, and we'll see who is going to be best for America going forward. But also from a Christian sense, how are we going to, people hate to say this, but the United States is a Christian country. It was built on Christian values. So who is going to more represent those Christian values of the United States and your Christian values? Who's going to allow you to have religious freedom, have the more freedoms, economically, have more freedoms with your rights, everything like that. And you have to look at the candidate that's going to do the most for you, you know?
Right.
Because a lot of the times we can fall into these teams of, oh, I'm red or I'm blue. And as citizens, it is imperative and it is our duty to put the best Americans forward. The Americans are going to be for America and making America number one and keeping America number one, which we're slowly losing a grasp on.
Yeah, well, I think when you said, you know, who's going to do the most for you, I think that's where we get kind of lost sometimes because, you know, when we see about, you know, when people were voting, you know.
Let me amend that. Yeah. Not who's going to do the most for you, who is going to allow you to do the most for yourself.
Yes.
I'll put it that way.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Because I think we've lost so much of that insight of, you know, it's almost like, what can you do for me? And I love that quote. I don't
JFK.
JFK asked what not you can do for your country, ask or what your country can do for you.
Yeah. Well, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
Exactly.
And
it hits.
Yeah, it's a very good quote. And
evergreen.
And it's guided me through my life because as a citizen, I think, what can I do for America? You know, in America that's doing the things not necessarily I wanted to do, but the things that were promised in the Constitution. But who's gonna uphold that the most? But sorry to cut you off.
Well, no, I think that's great, and you know, I sometimes feel a little bit like in my heart, I suppose that voting for Trump would be in some ways going backwards in a way that, he is a divisive, person in some regard. I do think his policies are great. I lost a little bit of respect for him when it came to his stance on the vaccine and stuff that he was saying of how it's the greatest thing of mankind in history. He saved 6 million people, like all that stuff I felt was completely wrong. I don't think he had the good people around him giving him good information.
I will say this on the vaccine though. I don't think Trump would have mandated it. I don't have a problem with, well, I do have a problem with them rushing out a vaccine, but whatever. We didn't know the extent of what was going on at the time. So I don't have a problem with him kind of, I have a problem with them rushing it out, but the situation, I can see why he would have made that decision. Where I have the problem with the whole COVID thing is the control that the government exerted afterwards. You have to get mandated, or you have to get the vaccine, or you're fired.
But you don't
have to do this.
And I agree with you, but you don't think there was control that was happening even during the midst of it, as far as like Trump being in on the stay in your house, 15 days to slow the spread, and then extending it, and then just essentially being part of the and criticizing Florida for opening up early. When the science was all pointing in the right direction of what Florida was doing, it seemed like he was kind of playing both sides a little bit too much, to the point where it was like he didn't really have a stance on it that was in line with, I feel like, what should have been the stance.
The freedom stance.
The freedom
like,
stance,
hey,
yeah.
Here's this vaccine. Here's all the information about it.
Yeah.
Like, we rushed it out. Take it if you feel like you need to.
But no, he said they even said safe and effective, and it's like you can't
say
call
that.
it that when there hasn't been
true.
trial and error. There hasn't been time of people taking it, seeing the fruit.
Let me ask you a question. What do you think of all these athletes that have been collapsing and stuff like that? The Damar Hamlin is the main one that comes to mind.
And I think it's crazy how God works, like, because that incident happens, and I saw it as an opportunity to get the conversation started about other athletes in college and soccer worldwide. A whole bunch. There's highlight reels of this is so sad. Highlight reels of athletes dropping. Like, who would have thought we'd ever say that ever? And it's not going all the way back. It's going in the last 2 years, and to see the numbers what they are in the last 2 years compared to the last 35 years, that's a bit alarming. To not even bring up the conversation, on these networks is a little bit alarming. That everybody on the internet's talking about it, could be a possibility, yet but nobody wants to talk about it on air.
Exactly.
But it was cool because we got to see the nation come together and really pray for him. We got to see people kneeling on the field again. This time they're allowed to do it, because of prayer, which is great. And then I don't know if you saw this, the first game the Buffalo Bills were back. After that, the guy, they kicked the ball off. The guy who ran it back for a touchdown.
Oh yeah, I did see that.
The first play, and like goosebumps, whoa, like crazy. Tell me how it's been. And the guy's number, Damar Hamlin's number 3, right? It's been 3 years and 3 months since the Bills had a kickoff return.
Oh really?
So to see kind of like all these little nuggets of like, dang, like that's God, to see that, it made me feel good. But also I'm hoping that it created a conversation that's gonna bring awareness to like the possibility that, hey, maybe your kids shouldn't be taking this if they're athletes, or hey, maybe your kids shouldn't be taking this at all. Like
maybe you should consult a knowledgeable doctor that's not taken away by
it's
this
not bought off
virus.
by big pharma too, and
exactly.
It's crazy. You never saw myocarditis commercials either, but now you're seeing them constantly on television. It's like, why is that? So it's like, why is this all of a sudden popping up when that was never the thing in the last 2 years, which is.
I will say this though, it could be, well, no, a lot of people say it could be COVID that's causing all this myocarditis, but I mean, I've had COVID 3 or 4 times and I feel great. It was just the flu, pretty much. And I know that there's a lot of people that weren't equipped to handle COVID like that, but I don't think that's the route that you should take with that is, oh, I'm susceptible to COVID. Everyone needs to get vaccinated and do all this. I'm susceptible to COVID. Why is that? If it's something controllable, like, oh, I'm overweight, or I'm not eating the healthiest, or I'm not taking care of myself, then you should take a really good look at that route and say, oh, like maybe I should start taking some better.
But people
care
want
of
the easy fix. People want the shot. And I understand. We're kind of conditioned to believe all vaccines are safe based on just our entire lives of being forced to have them to go to school. So I think there's just been a lot of lies that were surrounding it, and that usually happens when there's money involved. That usually happens when there's deception involved and intent and power involved. So I think a lot of people got duped. I think and that's okay. I've been duped before as well. I'll admit on air I got duped by some QAnon stuff. I was like, Trump's really the president, dog. Like, ain't no way you got 80 million votes. Like I was in that camp for a couple of weeks when I was, hopeful that, something would happen because I couldn't believe in my heart and spirit and soul that Biden got 80 million votes.
Well, I think he did. I really think he did. And I think that the media apparatus, like, enabled it. He didn't go and debate or do anything like that. He lied about almost every policy that he put forward.
Yeah, he ran a campaign from his basement.
Yeah,
and
it's just people really dislike Trump. Trump
really
is a very polarizing figure. I think he's maybe one of the greatest presidents we've ever had, but on the other side of the aisle, they think he's the worst.
Right.
So that disconnect is why I feel like I really hope if Ron DeSantis ends up getting the Republican nomination, let's say, that he doesn't get it as hard as Trump did, because it was very hard for Trump to do anything, and he still got a whole lot done.
Yeah, it was hard, and he got a lot of pushback, and he didn't have people on his team. It was all, and a lot of people got duped even in that 2016 to 2020 era of believing everything that the media was saying. And I think 2020 opened up the floodgates of real information, independent media, independent sources, podcasters coming on air.
It's great. It's great that you're doing this, man, because I get none of my news from corporate media anymore. Even Fox with the whole Kevin McCarthy thing. Shout out to Tucker Carlson. He's
a real one.
Yeah, he is a real one. Just because all these Fox hosts were saying like, "Oh, just vote McCarthy in, vote McCarthy in." Like, brother, look at McCarthy's track record. Like, look at his track record. He is not voting in line with what the people want. He is not voting in line with what the people want at all. That the people didn't want that $1.4 trillion omnibus bill to get sent through, with a whole bunch of spending our money over things that like don't affect us, don't matter. Our southern border's in shambles right now. $0 going to that.
Yeah,
But
there's money going to another border.
Exactly.
in another overseas nation.
More than just one.
Yeah.
We're sending the most money to Ukraine right now, but we're protecting Saudi borders. We're protecting Syrian borders. We're protecting all these other places, like where we at home, we're not protected. We don't feel protected. I don't feel like the government has our interest in mind anymore. And that's what we were saying with the Freedom Caucus. Even Trump came out and was like, just vote McCarthy in. I'm glad the Freedom Caucus did not listen, because look at all the gains that we made.
Yeah, real gains. And even just, the taking away the 87,000 IRS, additions. I think that's huge, because that's legit for the people. Because if you have, somebody looking at every single thing that you do, financially, that's a little bit overwhelming.
And they're not going to go after the rich. They're going to come after your mom and pop. Well, the ones that survived COVID anyway, which was another huge thing about those lockdowns. They shut down a whole bunch of small businesses for good. Yeah, for good. Yeah. Like it's hard to start back up again after that. But the ones that are remaining, they're coming after they're coming after my IRS dollars, or my tax dollars. They're not going to go after Bill Gates or anything like that.
So let's land
# let's see Bill Gates tax returns.
Get it trending. That's awesome, man. But this is a great show. Thank you so much for coming on. And this is a great plug, man. If you are in Texas right now, in the Burleson, Mansfield, Crowley, Fort Worth area, go see my boy Zach at Marksman Fireman's.
And I have to add, even if you're not comfortable with firearms, I am getting into firearms training soon. And I think, especially as a Christian and like as a citizen, you should be able to not put your confidence in protection in the police or anything like that. You should be able to put it into God and by extension, yourself.
Absolutely. Amen to that. I agree with that wholeheartedly, and I appreciate you training me up in the woods. I know people online been seeing my videos. I've been getting after it. Yeah. I'm usually the one behind the camera, but that's because y'all ain't ready to see what I've been doing out there.
No, but we'll get you there. We'll get you there.
Yeah, I want to be. When I'm on camera, bro, I want to be pristine. I want to be Jack Bauer from 24, right, Taylor? That was a pre-show reference we talked about. But thank you so much for coming on, Zach. For those listening, you can pick up 21 Days in Africa on Amazon if you like, or my website, ilikebirdsministry.com. We'll be back next month with some more special guests, maybe more than one. We'll see what's up. And we're excited for it. Please subscribe on YouTube if you haven't at I Like Birds Podcast. And you can also look us up on Instagram at I Like Birds Ministry. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Peace, y'all.